Welcome! This video covers enhancements made to the system for returning sourced items both when auto-sourcing is enabled and when it's disabled. Let's briefly discuss what we mean by auto-sourcing. This is a current feature of PartsWatch that allows the user to finalize an invoice for sourced items before the items arrive at the store. It's enabled by checking the Allow Auto Process Commercial Accounts or Allow Auto Process Retail Accounts checkboxes in Controls, Store, Source Setup. Enhancements have been made to the processes that occur both when this item is enabled and when it's disabled. Let's start with it enabled. When using Auto Process, if all goes well, the sourced item arrives at the store and is given to the customer. The invoice had already been processed at that point. Where the enhancement comes in is when either the customer refuses the item or the vendor did not actually have the item. In that case, a return invoice needs to be done to credit the customer. On previous releases, when an R modifier was done for a sourced item, the user was presented with the crediting a sourced item pop-up. The vendor did not have item option would process the return without increasing stock because there was no item. The item refused by customer option would either increase stock or send the item to a manifest depending on other flags in the system. These are both necessary options, but since vendor did not have item was the default button, users would sometimes select this option by mistake by pressing enter. This would lead to stock discrepancies. Some enhancements have been made to help prevent the user from selecting the wrong option. First, a new task has been added to the Override Security Setup screen, accessed by selecting Controls, System, Override Security. The new option is called Auto-Sourced Return for Vendor Canceled Item. If a manager override is set up for this function, then the user will be prompted for manager approval when the vendor did not have item button is clicked when returning an auto-sourced item at invoicing. Let's enable this manager override. The invoicing pop-up has also been improved, so let's go into invoicing and do a return. This functionality will apply to items sold with the BO, DS, or XF sourcing modifiers. I have auto-sourcing enabled, I have the new manager override enabled, and I've already sold a sourced item. So let's return that item and see what happens. First, the text in the pop-up has been changed from crediting a sourced item to crediting an auto-sourced item, as this pop-up only applies when using auto-sourcing. A cancel button has also been added and is now the default. So worst case, if it is selected by mistake, the user will just be taken back to the invoicing screen. The user can then attempt to return the item again and will again get the pop-up. The order of the two existing buttons has also been swapped, since Item Refused by Customer is the more commonly used button. This allows keyboard users to press Tab once to move the cursor from Cancel to Item Refused by Customer. Since we have the manager override set up, we will be prompted for a manager approval prompt when I click Vendor Did Not Have Item. A cancel button has also been added to the pop-up that displays when returning an item that was sold with an XF or transfer modifier under the following conditions. First, the auto-sourcing option is disabled in Controls, Store, Source Setup. And the vendor's sourced return destination is set to prompt in Vendor, Vendor Supplier, Supplier Order Specifics. So let's do a return of an XF modifier with those settings. This pop-up was created when the XF modifier was added to the system. The only changes are that the graphic has been removed from the pop-up, and as we saw in the other pop-up, a cancel button has been added. And the cancel button is the default so that the transaction will not accidentally be processed the wrong way. Cancel would close the pop-up and return the user to the invoice screen. Finally, we made changes to the override report to record when the manager override we talked about earlier is invoked. The existing report is found at Reports, Override Report. The option Auto-Sourced Return for Vendor Canceled Item has been added to the Task dropdown. If I select that option, we'll see the manager override I did earlier. The report shows the override that was made, the date it was done, the employee who requested the override, the manager, the invoice number, and the account number. And that's it. We hope you found this video helpful.